Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're joining us today in today's live lecture coming to you from Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University. Today's date is Oye Market Day in the Igbo lunar calendar and 9/15/25 in the foreign Roman Catholic calendar. Remember, the reason we are giving you both days is for you to know that we have our own calendar, and that is the one we're supposed to be using. If not that, our brothers who are continuously imposing the Western culture on us continues to use the foreign Roman Catholic calendar. And remember that at Nkolo Mahadum, we always advise you to use your naturally given common sense, which we call Akonuche in Igbo language. And we are set up to give you the correct information than the erroneous, false, fabricated, misinformation, miseducation, and misdirection from our colonial masters and their institutions and stooges all around our land. And we advise you to always like, always comment, always share these lectures to get to your loved ones and your friends, because we package and present our lectures from the Igbo man, Biafran and African perspectives. And the title of today's lecture is Balanced, Surplus, and Deficit Budgeting. Balanced budgeting, surplus or deficit budgeting. Which one should the Igbo race, Biafrans and Africans follow or use or pursue? Which one should we be practicing? Balanced budgeting, surplus budgeting, or deficit budgeting? Which one should we be following? Individually, in our businesses, in our organizations, in our institutions, in our countries, which one should we be following? It is very, very, very important that we listen and share this lecture to everybody. Before we continue, we have to define what balanced budgeting means, surplus budgeting, and deficit budgeting. Balanced budgeting is a situation where total revenue, total money coming to you equals the total expenditure, which means if the total money coming to you is, for example, $100, and your total expenditure is $100, which means your total revenue and total expenditure is equal, which means you are not saving any money. You don't have anything to save. When you engage in balanced budgeting, even in your house, as an individual, in your families, in your businesses, in your institutions, in your organizations and countries, whenever your total revenue is the same with your expenses, which means you don't have anything to save. They are equal. If it's $100 coming to you, you spend that $100, you don't have anything to save. Surplus budgeting or surplus budget, on the other hand, is where total revenue is greater than total expenditure. Again, if your total revenue is $100 and you are spending $50, now you have $50 for savings. That is surplus budget. So a surplus budget is when the total revenue, total money coming to you in anything that you are doing is greater than total expenditure. In that case, you are saving money. You are saving more money. for future problems, or investing that money, for your own benefit. Deficit budgeting is defined as a situation where total revenue is less than total expenditure, which means your total expenditure is more than the revenue. For example, if your revenue is $100, but your total expenditure is $200 or $150, you are running what we call deficit budget or deficit budgeting. Now, if your revenue is $100, the money coming to you is $100, and you are spending $200, which means you need $100 more to spend. And how do you get it? Through borrowing. Now you go to borrow to make it up, which means you are living above your means, which means you don't have the money that you're spending. That is what and how so many individuals, so many families, so many countries, so many institutions, so many organizations operate. They operate deficit budgeting. And we want to give you, because many countries that we tell you that they are operating balanced budgets, at the end of the day, eventually you don't have a lot of countries practicing balanced budgets. And nobody supposed to be practicing balanced budgets, where any money coming to you, you spend all of them. Each time, every money coming to you, you spend all of them. That is balanced budgeting. No country practices that. So even if you are practicing balanced budgeting, it doesn't give you any room to save. You are just spending what is coming to you. And so some countries that are practicing, that have surplus budgeting, which means if their revenue, for example, is $100, they are spending only $50. So they are saving $50. Such countries include Denmark. It includes Tuvalu, Qatar, Hong Kong, Tonga, Kuwait, Norway, Singapore, Lesotho, Botswana, China, Nepal. You see the Nepal the other day that the population is rioting. They are actually having surplus budgets. This is just to mention a few. There are many countries practicing surplus budgets. And the credit for this information goes to World Atlas. World Atlas is the one that have a list of all the countries that are practicing surplus budgets. And if you look at that list, you see that Lesotho and Botswana are the only two African countries practicing surplus budgets. How about the countries practicing deficit budgets? Remember, deficit budget is when you are spending more than you are getting. The countries that are practicing deficit budgeting includes United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Ukraine, Uganda, to mention a few. There are so many of them. You have many countries practicing deficit budgeting than those practicing surplus budgeting. And the credit for this information comes from countryeconomy.com. It was countryeconomy.com that have a list of all the countries practicing deficit budgeting. And one interesting thing about the countries that are practicing deficit budgeting include the countries we revere, the countries we look upon as role models. Such countries as United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, Spain, Italy. Most of the Western European countries are practicing deficit budgeting, which means they are borrowing money. They are borrowing money to sustain the lifestyles in their countries. That's what we want you to know. That is the takeaway from this lecture, that we want you to know that most of the countries we are looking upon as good countries, countries doing well, they are practicing deficit budgeting, which means they don't have no money. They don't. See what is happening in France right now. France is almost broke, trying to go to IMF for bailouts. So that is why we want to present this lecture to you, to understand that these countries that you are looking upon, even the United States, have a deficit of almost $37 trillion. And so many of them. And these are the countries that we are looking upon as good countries, as better countries that we should be emulating. No, you shouldn't be emulating them. You emulate the countries with surplus budgets. Surplus budgeting is the best way to go, because with surplus budgeting, you have much more money. You have much more money with you than in deficit budgeting. And so the question is, which one will the Igbo race, Biafrans and Africans should follow? Which one should we follow? You know that we cannot guide you wrongly, and you know that the Igbo race, the Biafrans and Africans, should follow surplus budgeting. Follow surplus budgeting, because that is the way out. That is the only way you and your people can be living a better life. And how do you get to have surplus budgeting? The first reason is you produce what you consume. Make sure that you are engaging your people, all your population, in production. As long as you are engaging all your population in production, you will have surplus budgeting. And you should also be contented, be satisfied with what you have. Don't be looking at somebody else. Don't be looking at another culture. Don't be looking at what is going on in that culture. Because what they are telling you may be only to distract you, to deceive you, to make sure that you be like them. Another way for you to have a surplus budget is to consume only what you can afford. Consume only what you can afford. If you cannot afford anything, leave it alone. Find a substitute. Look for a substitute, something like that one, and use it and be contented with it. Bring down the cost of, cut down on your expenses. Cut your expenses down, be it in government, be it in whatever you are doing. Cut it down. Make sure your expenses is down. And also educate your population correctly. Educate your population to understand that surplus budgeting is the best way to go, that you have to sacrifice to have surplus budgeting. And one information we want you to know that that information is wrong. We want to debunk that information. We want to tell you that anyone telling you that borrowing money is good, that borrowing money is good, that it depends on what you are using the money for. How is borrowing money good? Why are we always following this model of borrowing? Why can't we follow the model of surplus, like China, like Kuwait, like Norway, like Singapore, like Lesotho, Botswana, Nepal, and other countries that are having surplus budget? Why can't we follow that one, that have much money that they don't have to borrow? So let's take ourselves, let us know that borrowing is not a way out. A country like Nigeria, you know, has been borrowing so much money recently. Always borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Why are you borrowing money when you know that you can do better with surplus budgeting by cutting down on your expenses and engaging yourself into production, into massive production? These are the things we want to use this lecture to explain to our people. And before we continue, we have to ask you to please like our lecture, like it, comment, and share it to everybody, because it is very, very, very good. Because we bring information and present it from an Igbo man, from Biafran and African perspective, how you should be seeing things. You see things from how it concerns you, not how it concerns other cultures. And the title of today's lecture is Balanced Surplus and Deficit Budgeting, which one should the Igbo race, Biafrans and Africans, follow in our private lives, in our families, in our organizations, and in our country, in our states, in our, anything that we are doing. And we began to define what balanced budgeting and surplus deficit budgeting mean. And balanced budgeting is a situation where the revenue, money coming to you, money that you are getting, equals total money that you are spending. So if you are getting 1 naira, you are spending 1 naira. You don't have anything to say. You don't have anything to back you up. That is called balanced budgeting. And many countries, nobody likes to practice balanced budgeting because, you're just eating. It's just like eating what you have. Whatever comes to you, you just eat it. You don't have anything to fall back upon. You don't have anything to fall back to. And then surplus budgeting is where the total revenue is greater, is bigger than how much that you are spending. So if you are making $100, you are probably spending $50 or $20, and the rest you can save. And that is what we are calling for the Igbo race, Biafrans and Africans. And then deficit budgeting is where the total revenue, total money coming to you, is less than total expenditure, which means you are spending more than is coming to you. That exposes you to borrowing. That exposes you to manipulation. That exposes you to influence, negative influence, which means you can be deceived, trying to guide you to come out from your deficit. Somebody can come and be telling you something, do this to come out from your deficit, and that person is actually lying to you. And the credit. And so we mention the countries that have surplus, some of them, because there's a few of them. And some of them are Denmark, Tuvalu, Qatar. You know, the other day you had the Israel bombing Hamas negotiators in Qatar. Yeah, that's Qatar. Has a surplus budget. They have money. Hong Kong, China, Nepal, And Nepal the other day, we all see all the riots, against their government, but their government are actually doing good for them. They don't know that the government is actually doing good for them. And that riot they're doing in Nepal have now put Nepal in the hands of the unipolar, globalist, one world order. But they don't know. The population was being deceived. And the information, the credit for these surplus countries goes to World Atlas. That's a lot of them, but we just mentioned a few. And then the countries that are practicing deficit budgeting, that is, they are borrowing money, includes United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Ukraine, Uganda, to mention a few. And the credit for this deficit budgeting countries come from countryeconomy.com. And this deficit countries is one of the reasons why we are making this lecture to you, for you to know that the countries we are looking upon, some of the countries we are saying they are doing good, they are big, they are this and that, they are the model, they are the ones that running deficit budget. And they don't have money, they are broke. And France is broke right now that they are looking for IMF bailouts. And so is UK. All these countries, Germany, their economy is in shambles, because they have been indulging in this deficit budgeting for a very, very long time. And they are poor. They owe money that they cannot pay back. That is one thing we want you to know from this lecture. And then we are asking, which of these models will the Igbo race, Biafrans and Africans, pursue or follow or be using? And we are advocating for Africans to go to surplus budgeting. And we have enumerated some of the things that we can do, Africans can do, to help them to go into that surplus budgeting. And one of them is to produce what you consume. Make sure that majority of what you are consuming in your country is being produced in your community, in your village, in your town. Stop looking for foreign things that you cannot afford. Engage into productivity and be contented with what you are producing. Like the Aba-made products, for example, in Igbo race. Aba-made products should be written made in Aba. And our people should be buying it, because that is our own. Anything produced in Igbo land should be patronized happily and with content, with satisfaction, that this is coming from Igbo land. And we have to patronize them. We have to encourage them. We have to use what is ours. That is how you have surplus budgeting. And not when you have a shoe being made in Aba, you are using the one being made in Italy. Why? It doesn't make sense. Another way for you to have surplus budgeting is to don't consume what you cannot afford. You see somebody that cannot afford even the product from Aba or from Onitsha. You are looking for a product from USA or Germany. Why are you doing that? Why can't you proudly use the product from Aba, or use the one from Newi, or use the one from Onitsha, or Owerri, or Port Harcourt, or anywhere in Biafra land? That's what we should be doing, and not always following foreign things. The next approach is for you to bring down or cut down your expenses. Cut down your expenses. All these workers you have in government houses, some of them coming there to sleep, some of them coming there to do other businesses. trim the workforce so that if somebody comes to work, they have to, the output, they have to produce an output greater than their salary. That's how you produce, I mean, you cut down on expenses. And the government, for example, the state governments that we have now should cut down on their commissioners and their aides, and also on your people following the governor. On people following you, should cut them down. The governor should travel by themselves, not with entourage. You know, cut down expenses, cut down the expenses. All these government and law enforcement agents, are they really doing the work to pay their salary? Are they really producing their salary? Any worker should be able to produce their salary. That's how you cut down on expenses. And we are saying, educate your population correctly. Educate them to know that surplus budgeting is the best way for everybody. It is the best way for everybody. And then anybody telling you that borrowing is good, that it depends on what you are using the money for, is telling you lies, because in most cases, most of the money that are borrowed are being embezzled, are being stolen through corruption. And so these are the ways for you to have surplus budgeting. And this also goes to individuals, families, parochial organizations, other institutions of the Africans, and the others. Cut your coat according to your size. That's what you need to do to have surplus budgeting, because those countries you are looking upon as great countries, as good countries, they are undergoing deficit budgeting, and they are becoming broke right now. Countries like France is broke, United Kingdom is broke, Germany is broke, Italy is broke, Greece had been broke long time ago. All of them, Portugal, all of them, they were all engaging in deficit budgeting. And deficit budgeting is not good for we Africans. And with this, I will bring today's lecture to an end. But before we do, please like our lecture, comment, and share. And all Africans should stand up so that we can dismantle all the colonial boundaries in Africa. Because the colonial boundaries in Africa are the sources of the poverty, the wars, the tribalism, the exploitation, the migration, the killings, the dehumanizations that we are having in our land. And with this, we shall be bringing today's lecture to an end. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, and bye-bye.